What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the broader markets. I'm going to talk about some key levels to watch for what's going to likely happen for tomorrow, looking at the setups. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. Anyways, I want to wish you all a very, very happy Labor Day weekend. The stock market is closed for today, but we will be back in action tomorrow in a normal trading session. Now, I just want to say that with the way the market's moving, we're still technically on an uptrend as we're trying to make higher lows on the S&P 500, but there is a risk of a potential head and shoulders like pattern that could be developing here if we get a rejection of this resistance near 646.5. And if we end up establishing a lower high, there's going to be a risk of us once again turning. Now, I'm not going to be 100% promising anything because you have to remember sometimes the market could be very, very capricious. But the best thing for me to tell you is that we're going to be watching our levels for confirmation and we'll see which way we end up going. But I will tell you guys what I think is going to likely happen in just a couple of minutes. So for tomorrow, okay, we just have NEO announcing earnings and a couple of minor earnings. On Wednesday, we have Dollar Tree, Macy's, and a few more. Then we have Salesforce as well. On Thursday, we essentially have just minor retail earnings, nothing way too serious. So earnings is a bit more quiet this week. And then for tomorrow, it's going to be Tuesday, September 2nd, 2025. At 9:45 a.m., we have the S&P Global Manufacturing PMI report. And then at 10 o'clock a.m., we essentially have the ISM Manufacturing PMI, employment new orders, and prices. So all this data might cause some volatility. So be ready just to be safe. So be ready for volatility around 9:45 a.m. and 10 a.m. tomorrow. That's 15 minutes and 30 minutes after the stock market opens. And last but not least, when it comes to President Trump, there was big news that came out. So the news is saying that the appeals courts have once again come out and they have ruled a lot of President Trump's tariffs illegal. But the thing is, the ruling does not take effect right now. It's not going to take effect until October. And until then, President Trump can essentially go to the Supreme Court and appeal there. So he still has time to once again argue with these decisions. And obviously, politics gets in the way and other things like that. So, like I said before, the ruling will not take effect until October to give the Trump administration a chance to ask the Supreme Court to take up the case. So once again, that's very, very important, and we'll have to see what happens. President Trump is also not happy about this. I talk about this because this could cause some volatility. There might be a little bit of uncertainty about the tariffs. So we'll see what that leads to. But for now, what I think is that, we're technically on an uptrend. The market's been trying to make higher lows. I do think we're going to try to retest 646.5 on SPY. So we're going to be looking for a test of that tomorrow morning. And we need to hold above 646.5 for there to be some hope for bulls try to get back up close to all-time highs. If we can't hold this, I do see a risk of us potentially turning back down soon and eventually forming a left shoulder, head, and right shoulder. Now, my seasonality chart suggests that the first week of September tends to be bearish. The second week tends to be when we bounce, and the third and fourth weeks tend to be a lot more bearish. So in that case, that would suggest that this week we could be looking for some downside. There might be a temporary short-lived bounce towards like 646.5. We need to hold above this for there to be hope for bulls. If we hold above 646.5, then yes, you're going to be looking for an attempt for 648 or above. But if we don't hold that, if we kind of reject off that, there's going to be a risk of us retesting the lows from Friday. And if we start losing this trend line right here, see this white trend line that SPY is trying to hold. If that finally fails us, we're going to be looking for a move all the way down towards, I would say, potentially the 638 to 635 area. The head and shoulders could pan out right here. And then that's also where the support happens to be. So notice that we're holding this white trend line right here. This is our support. We're bouncing, and bouncing off support. But in this case, we could start to lose support. If that's the case, that could be our first break of structures. So watch and see. Is this going to be a head and shoulders? And do we get some kind of rejection on SPY? Or do we break 646.5 to break out? I do lean a bit more in favor of this setup for the week, where we kind of just push to 646.5, consolidate, and then start dipping a little bit lower. So I want to give you guys a warning about that. There is a chance we might be looking for a break. But I want to see confirmation just to be safe. I want to see us get a confirmed break. September is known for being the most bearish month of the year for the stock market. So be careful and watch your levels just to be safe. If SPY cannot hold 642, look for a dump to 640, if not 638. But if we break 646.5, we could turn back up. So make sure you watch your levels depending on our data. But the most likely setup is this move right here, forming this head and shoulders, potentially coming down due to seasonality. And because of, maybe the data is what they're going to use to drop the markets or other factors like that. There's also some uncertainty about President Trump's tariffs. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. Another confluence to kind of like look at things that way would be the fact that the QQQ has failed to make new highs. It's actually made a lower high, whereas SPY has made new highs, which shows a divergence. And then on top of that, there's a left shoulder, head, and right shoulder forming on tech, on the QQQ, and many other tech sectors. So if you want to be a bull, just hypothetically, okay, if you want to be a bull, you need to see the QQQ basically get back above this resistance 578 break that we're back up. If we come short, if we push to 572 to 573.5 tomorrow and we can't make new highs and we just kind of reject, watch this white trend line. If we lose the white trend line here, I think we easily drop to 566 or below. That also aligns with this left shoulder, head, and right shoulder. And if we lose this white trend line acting support, if that fails us, then yes, this could easily start dipping to the mid 560s or below. And then once again, you're also forming a left shoulder, head, and right shoulder, a smaller one. We were talking about this on Friday. So that does create the downside risk. So if we hold above 578, we're back to bullish. We're going to likely go to new all-time highs on the QQQ. If we can't do that, if we get rejected between 573 to 575 and we just start turning down, then I'm looking for a miniature head and shoulders right here. And then you want to see this trend line break. If you draw a trend line like this, if we lose this trend line, this is currently going to be around 568. If that fails us, be ready for 566 and the low 560s for a head and shoulders rejection on the QQQ. On the IWM, as you can tell, we're on an uptrend, but there is one thing that concerns me. There is a bearish divergence here, so it depends. This is actually showing more resilience in SPY in the QQQ. Break 238, we're more bullish, but lose 234, we're going to be turning back down. I would not be surprised if we kind of consolidate like this, and eventually we might turn down if we can't break this high. So look for a small bounce attempt to 236 or so. We need to break that to really continue to break out. If we come short, this could be a slanted head and shoulders as well that could be forming, taking us back down to 231. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. ES is holding up decently, but I need to see this basically hold above 6,500 to be bullish. If we touch 6,500 tomorrow and we can't break it, once again, guys, we have a clear left shoulder ahead. Are we about to form a right shoulder and start rejecting? It's possible, but let's see how it reacts to 6,500. If we break that, we could break out higher. If we don't, we could turn right back down. On NQ, same setup. Now, NQ looks, just like tech. Tech is leading this left shoulder, head, right shoulder. Also, there's a divergence between NQ and ES or the S&P 500. So it might try to go for these highs, 23,600 and consolidate. But notice that we have this left shoulder ahead and potentially a right shoulder forming. That could actually take us back down to 23,300 or below. Once again, that's going to be very, very key for how we end up moving, but be very, very careful. For Bitcoin, we're also forming a double bottom here. We could be retesting 110,489. If not, we could be turning back down. I do see an attempt to push back up towards 110,500, and we'll see if we reject or not. But notice that the yellow line right here, this is our 50 EMA. We're kind of rejecting a lot off of this. So we're rejecting, and rejecting. So be very, very careful. If we touch 110,500, we could be turning back down towards the lows. So be very, very mindful of that. For Tesla, I'm concerned about this left shoulder, head, and right shoulder. I do see downside risk unless we get back above 341. If we can't hold above that, I would be careful that Tesla may consolidate tomorrow. And then if it can't hold above 230, be ready for a dip all the way down to the low 220s for a temporary move down as we have a head and shoulders. Might be looking for a move like this unless we get back above 341 to bounce. So be careful. Nvda has this big support around 171 to 170. I think we're going to likely test 170 to 171 and we'll see if we bounce or not. So look for some temporary downside most likely. Apple's looking okay. We're in a range. We like to reject near 234, but we also like to get bought back up around 225. We might touch this 230 zone, and then I do think if this turns, we could be retesting 228. And we'll see if this bounces or not, but I do see a test of 230 to 228 likely coming. Netflix is at support here. Is this going to be a left shoulder head and then right shoulder? I would be very, very careful with Netflix because it's looking kind of distributive right here. So we could retest 1215. We're going to see if we break out higher or not. If we don't, then we could be dipping back down towards 1180. So be very, very careful. For MSCI, we're on a bit of a downtrend. We're going to see if we get back above 342. If we don't, we might consolidate, then dip back down to about 323. Celsius is looking a bit more bullish. We're favoring 66, and we'll see if it rejects or not. It's holding above 60 quite well, so this setup does favor a retest of 66, and we'll see if it breaks. Supermicro is looking kind of weak here. It's rejecting unless we get back above 42.5. We're favoring a move back down to 40 or below. Palantir is consolidating unless we get back above 157. We're going to be favoring 150. Rivian is looking more bullish, favoring 14 to be tested very soon. SoFi has a double top here. We need to hold 25.32. If this holds, it could still bounce for 26.5 and outperform the market. But then we'll see if it rejects. AMD looks a little bit weak to me. It does like to bounce near 161, so we need to hold 161. If it holds, we're looking for a bounce to 165. We're still technically consolidating, but if it doesn't hold, we're looking for a dip to 157. I think it may consolidate for some time before it dips to 157. The downside risk is there. ARM might be dipping back down to 135. PayPal might be retesting 70.78, and we'll see if it rejects. Coinbase is going to likely consolidate, and we'll see if we end up dipping back down to about the low 300s. Amazon might be retesting, especially around like 227.5 or below. So I do think there's going to be a risk of us testing 227.5 or below, and we'll have to see how it goes. Meta might be tipping back down to 731.5, and we'll see if it holds. But I do see some downside risk on Meta. Google looks more bullish, however. Unless it loses 2.209, we're still favoring 215 or above. This is still very resilient. Microsoft is not looking too good. Notice it was consolidating between our EMAs. Now it's below. We need to get back above 507. If it doesn't, it's going to likely retest 502. So it does look a little bit weaker. And the VIX, this might come down a little bit. Maybe the market bounces in the morning, but as time goes on, we're going to be looking for a break of 16.6. If that breaks, I think there's going to be an attempt to fill this gap, taking us back up to 20 within the next couple of weeks. I do think it might fill this gap. So be careful, guys, with the VIX. Might come down initially as the market tries to bounce in the morning. But as time goes on, if this breaks 16.6, that could be our downside trigger. The dollar is still showing some signs of a bounce, and crude is kind of flat, so it's not really too much affecting the markets. Tomorrow morning, the market might try to go a little bit higher. SPY might retest 646.5. The QQQ might retest 573. But then we'll see if we get a rejection off these head and shoulders like patterns or not. These could be developing on SPY and the QQQ. So be very, very careful with tech and what's about to happen. Historically, September tends to be a more bearish month. So we'll see if we end up turning down. We'll see if we start off with a bounce tomorrow, and then we'll see if we end up turning down after that. There are head and shoulders like patterns on SPY and the QQQ. And then on top of this, we also happen to have a lot of data coming out for tomorrow. So be ready for all of this. It's all going to be very, very key for how we end up moving. Anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you guys have a very, very happy Labor Day. I'll be back tomorrow morning before market open. Until then, enjoy the rest of the holiday. Enjoy your guys' weekends, and I'll be back very soon. Thank you for listening, and peace out.